hoje traz 2 vídeos inéditos sobre portadores de deficiências físicas ou mentais. O primeiro deles registra os problemas de uma família diante das dificuldades auditivas de Thomas, o filho mais novo. Em seguida, você vai conhecer a alegre rotina de portadores de síndrome de Down e também de outras deficiências mentais num centro de assistência na Espanha. Ainda sobre o tema, você vai assistir a 2 vídeos já exibidos pela TV Escola. Agora é com você.
Funding for a Deaf Son is made possible in part by Accordia, a network of companies providing insurance brokerage, administration, and selected financial services across America, and by a grant from the Southwestern Bell Foundation. Funding also is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Southern Educational Communications Association.
Thomas, it was 2 years ago when your mom called me on the phone. She was crying, and all I could think about was the music you would never hear. We didn't know a thing about what it really means to be deaf.
Thomas! Tommy!
In March of 1988, students at Gallaudet University for the Deaf in Washington, D.C. shut the school down. They were demanding that for the first time ever, the board choose a deaf person to lead the university as president. When the students won, it was hailed as a great victory for deaf people everywhere. My family and I were living in Dallas, Texas when all that was going on, and frankly, we had other things on our mind. Lori and I were expecting our second child, and our son Matthew couldn't wait to meet what he hoped would be his new baby brother. In September of 1988, Thomas Shai Tranchant was born.
Thomas.
After that came first steps and first birthdays, all the usual family stuff.
Thomas. I have to get closer. Thomas. Thomas.
Life was pretty normal until Lori began to suspect that something was wrong.
Oh, hi.
Don't you remember those little gurgling sounds he made? But it was about when he was a year old that I started thinking, something's wrong. There's something different. And we crept into his room, and we both whispered, Thomas. And he quickly turned around, and you walked out going, see, there's not a thing wrong with Thomas. But I continued to have sort of suspicions, and he went and was examined, and the lady came out of the booth and said, honey, he wouldn't hear a train go by. And that was just so devastating for me. I thought I was just stabbed with a knife. But I held it together until I got in the car, and then got the kids buckled up and cried all the way home.
When my mom came out, she was crying. I asked her what's wrong. She said, Tommy is deaf. I think that was one of the saddest experiments of my life.
After Thomas was diagnosed, we went to Boston and had a whole battery of tests done on him. It lasted a week. And finally, at the end of all these tests, there was a little ray of hope. We found out that he had high-frequency hearing, and that meant that we'd be able to put hearing aids on him and that he could, with therapy, acquire speech. And that seemed great. I mean, that's what we thought we wanted.
Turn it up, make it louder.
And so we focused on hearing aids and speech therapy. We learned that there are about 23 million Americans with some kind of hearing loss. Thomas was classified as profoundly deaf, but deaf was a word we never used. Nobody could ever tell us why Thomas had lost his hearing, and it hurt not to know.
But I often wonder if there was something I did or didn't do that could have been avoided to prevent this. And I'll never know. Tommy can't tell us when he stopped hearing, or was he always like that? I don't know.
Drop it when you hear it. Listen again. Listen.
As Thomas grew older, his audiologist helped us to understand the connection between hearing and speech.
There it is.
And slowly, we began to realize how hard we would have to struggle to communicate with our own child.
Children learn their language by overhearing it. They don't make a conscious effort. They overhear, they listen, they just absorb like auditory sponges. A deaf child is cut off from that. Now let me show you what children hear like who have some small amounts of residual hearing. I'll approximate that for you.
When the sunlight strikes raindrops from the air, they act like a prism from the rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors.
So you hear the voice, and it's muffled and it's unclear. Well, children speak the way they hear. So first of all, it's hard to even recognize that there's a language going on, so they won't pick up language code. And if they do pick up some, and they have to have something to say, when they have something to say, it will sound muffled. So if you'll excuse me for imitating deaf speech, when it comes out, it might sound something like this. This is the speech of somebody who hears very well in the low pitches, but not in the high pitches. So they speak like they hear, and their speech is very characteristic.
Say baseball. Say baseball. Baseball. Good.
Good.
We didn't care what Thomas sounded like. We just wanted him to talk.
Cowboy.
Cowboy.
Say cowboy.
Cowboy.
Yeah. Airplane.
Airplane.
We didn't know then how complicated things would get.
Say the word dinosaur.
Dinosaur.
Say turtle.
Cow.
Say cowboy.
Each word Thomas spoke gave us hope, but the pain was never far away.
The first time someone said that it was made for my brother being deaf was, it really hurt me a lot. And then people found out that it did hurt me. So other people started trying it and then denied it. And
What kind of stuff did they say?
like, it was I don't have a deaf brother, and like when we're playing a game and someone yells, "Come on, Matthew, come on, follow me," and you don't hear him, and they go, "You're deaf just like your brother."
My brother Thomas is deaf, but the good things about him are you can sneak into his room when he's not looking and he won't hear you. You can whisper bad things to him and he won't know what you're saying. But the bad things are he yells a lot because he can't hear himself yell, so he yells louder. He needs more attention, which I don't think he needs. And you learn stuff about what you should do to a deaf person. Like, Mom, put Thomas on the ground. Okay, Tommy, on the go talk you to him. Like, if you go like this, Thomas, he has to look up. But if you go like this, he doesn't have to look up. That'll all hurt. He's gonna do something bad. I just noticed.
Is that Itsy Bitsy Spider? Are you doing the spider?
Thomas, the Itsy Bitsy Spider.
Cross your hands.
Okay, this way.
You wanna...
Come on, this way.
See, it's very tough for Thomas to express himself because he doesn't have a whole lot of words.
Want me to do this?
How'd you feel when you found out Thomas was deaf?
I felt very sad. I cried for about 3 days. It is very hard.
Little pig, let me come in, said the wolf. And the second little pig said, no, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. And he he puffed. And he blew the house down.
What would you like me to do? Tell me. Use your words.
And what happens to Spider's shoe?
The zip broke.
It broke?
When it was time for Thomas to go to preschool, we had a choice. We could put Thomas in a class where teachers used speech supported by signs. Or we could choose a speech-only classroom. We chose the speech-only class.
It seemed to be obvious that that's what we wanted. We wanted our child to be like us. Well, also, too, a lot of people said, if your child is signing, they will prefer sign over speaking because it's so much easier for a child to sign. And for a deaf child, they have to really work hard at listening. And so if they have to work hard at doing something versus doing something naturally or, you know, whatever comes more easily to them, of course the kid's going to choose the easier route.
Out. Yes, Mama say it.
Take it out.
Kenny Orihuelo is one of Thomas's classmates. Kenny used to sign, but his parents decided to have him fitted with a cochlear implant, a surgically implanted device that imitates the way the inner ear works.
Boy, he really hears with that, doesn't he?
With the implant in place, the family has now switched to a method that requires Kenny to develop his listening skills.
He can be deaf. If he wants to sign when he gets older, that's fine with me. I can live with that. I just wanted to give him choices. And the other way, I don't think he would have had the choice.
I think to me it's really rewarding to see Kenny. Sometimes we are playing and a truck goes by and blows a horn, and Kenny will turn his head to me and smile and go like this, you know, like he hears something. You know, that he heard that thing, whatever it is. And to me, that's very rewarding, you know, that before Kenny couldn't hear anything.
I personally think it's important to be able to speak to whomever you want, as opposed to signing where very few people in the public sign. And in my opinion, that when an individual signs and really doesn't have functional speech or clear enough speech to function independently in the world, in that event, the deafness determines what they can do in their life.
We had to quit going to church when he lost his hearing because in the nursery they didn't know what he wanted, and he would leave the nursery crying. They had to come get us out of church. So I started calling different churches, and out of 100 churches in the area, we had a choice of one that provided an interpreter. And that's when I realized how limited his life would be if he couldn't talk. I would at least like him to have that choice, you know.
Signing is very quick, and it gets language and it gets expression very early. But in my opinion, it, in many children, inhibits their ability to speak later on, especially the children that are more profoundly hearing impaired. This method may take a little longer to get going, but the long-term effects are an adult that can speak.
Is this hammering?
Since Thomas had some hearing in the higher frequencies, we were told that a cochlear implant wouldn't be appropriate for him. Still, Lori and I wanted him to talk, and that meant hours of speech therapy.
Thomas, listen.
Daddy, Daddy.
Yes, Tommy.
Daddy.
Yes.
Papa, no.
You heard it, Thomas. You were listening.
No.
You heard it.
Daddy, Daddy, Papa, no, I want it.
Does the bell say woof, 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 woof?
Oh.
No, it doesn't. What does the bell say?
Master. Shark. Shark.
But after more than 2 years of therapy, Thomas's language development was still poor. Thomas could imitate most of the speech sounds of English, and he could respond to simple questions, but he couldn't really communicate. Often what he said was just gibberish. We had read that children's language development blossoms between the ages of 3 and 6. Thomas was 4, and we felt that time was running out.
Okay, Thomas, please, do not hit. Do not, Wait a second, okay? Because...
Lori was especially frustrated. It's hard to say this now, but I had let her take most of the responsibility for dealing with Thomas's deafness. She was stronger, and it made it easier for me.
All right, can I have a kiss? Can I have a kiss? Can I have a hug?
When I was given a chance to make a documentary about Thomas, Lori knew it was a way for me to get more involved. I began my research by attending a conference of deaf people. I learned that their language, American Sign Language, is not simply a manual substitute for English, but a true language with its own grammar and structure. ASL is a visual language that uses not only the hands, but the body and the face grammatically.
We deaf people have a culture, right? Hearing people, they look at us and they're not satisfied with the deaf because we don't talk.
And I discovered a sense of community among the deaf that I never knew existed.
And we've learned that the deaf community is not a loosely knit community, as one might say, the community of television people or the community even of blind people, but a true community, as you might say, the community of American Navajos, let's say, with their own language, their own special mores, values, history, heroes, all that goes with having a culture.
And what we found through our research and through our experience with the deaf community is that living in a world as a visual person is very different from living in the world as a hearing person. Of course, underlying it all is the same humanity that we all share, but how we process the world, how we process language, what we need as hearing persons and as deaf persons is very, very different in order to achieve our potential, which is, of course, the same for everyone as a human being.
Gallaudet University has been called the cultural capital of the deaf world. Deaf is normal here, and hearing people are the ones who need interpreters. I wanted to learn more about deafness and about the issues affecting our family.
93% of all deaf children have 2 hearing parents. That means that the parents themselves, when they discover that they have a deaf child, have probably never encountered deaf people before. So not only is it a shock, and they go through a grieving process because their child isn't what they expected, a normal hearing child, but they also don't really know what deafness means. They don't know what it means to be a deaf person.
Ate this one, ate this one, and ate that one. Ate them all up. It was full? No, not yet. He wanted more. But how much? In the house, how much did he eat?
I visited a class at Kendall Elementary School on the Gallaudet campus. The school's mission is to find ways to improve an educational system that almost everyone agrees has failed deaf children for years.
One of the figures you hear when you begin to look into this is that deaf children on average achieve a 4th grade reading level upon graduation from school, from high school.
Waited and waited and let him sleep, sleep, and sleep. And he wakes up, he should be a butterfly.
Often parents, when they realize that their child is not achieving their potential, they're made to feel that it didn't work because they didn't work hard enough, or their child didn't work hard enough, when the whole premise of what they were told in the beginning, I believe, is flawed. And the basic flaw, I believe, lies in the fact that our school system has not really accepted the fact that deaf children are deaf and have tried throughout the years to make deaf children as much like hearing children as possible. That's been the underlying goal.
Where's the juice? Shirley wants more. Where is it?
In the classroom at Kendall, speech was used very little, but there was plenty of communication. And watching these children made me feel even more frustrated about Thomas.
I mean, he's saying what? Mommy, daddy,
Juice.
milk?
Says juice, sit down right now. I don't want it, but that's all. He can't say, this is a lovely day, or, you know, thank you for being nice to me.
Well, that's because he's been taught all the speech sounds as possible, but he hasn't been taught the concept, the vocabulary with which to work. I think you've seen a class that we have here at Kendall. You see the kids just bursting with language. They have the concept.
Do you want any more? For sure, really? Do you want another story? Fine. Okay, the title is The Eagle and the Squirrel. Okay?
At storytelling time, I saw how deaf children respond to visual communication.
I would love to see more hearing parents do some more type of this communication with their children, acting out stories, acting out ideas and thoughts, in trying to express themselves in any way that they know how, rather than locking themselves into using words all the time, which might mean very little to deaf children.
If I had a deaf child like Thomas, I would want him to have both. I would want to encourage his English as much as possible, because I know the world he lives in relies heavily on English, and that better his writing, reading ability, the farther he will go. But at the same time, I study his language, and I would encourage that I wouldn't have both. And if I were a hearing parent, I would try very hard to learn as much as I could, so that he would understand that I'm not looking down at his deafness, and feel good about him as a person. His deafness doesn't bother me.
I learned that the sign language I saw being used on the Gallaudet campus had once flourished in American schools for the deaf. But around 100 years ago, advocates of speech training fought a successful battle against sign language in the classroom. Until the early 1970s, sign language was forbidden in many schools, and there are deaf adults who remember those days with anger and resentment.
Lots of those angry adults feel they've been cheated. They've been cheated out of a good education. They've been cheated out of a good relationship with their own families. They've been shut out of so many things because they were restricted only to one method. Holism. Now they're angry about that. And to be honest with you, since they have a right to be angry.
I can remember when I was 13 years old. I had a teacher, a hearing teacher, who was so high-strung, very anxious. She couldn't tolerate any type of noise that the deaf children made. And worst of all, she couldn't tolerate the sounds we made when we laughed. And she said, "You sound like animals in a zoo." And she picked on one boy by the name of Sam, says, "Oh, your laughter sounds like chalk on a blackboard." So she made us stand and put our hands on our stomachs to let the air out and inhale and exhale. She made us do this. And we all practiced inhaling and exhaling with our hands on our stomach. And then she said, "Now we'll add the voice. Add the voice like this. From the stomach, not from the head, but from the chest. Let it all come out, okay?" And then she kept picking on Sam, popping him on the head and saying, "You know, you're not doing it right." And so we practiced and practiced, and finally, you know, we practiced with our hands on our chest. Then we added the voice. And as you hear it, that's how we laugh. Ha, 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 ha. And she said, "Oh, you sound so nice, so pleasant. So pleasant that hearing people would never guess that you were deaf."
Intolerance is the subject of Clayton Valley's American Sign Language poem, Dandelion. Because it is a visual work, Valley told me the poem can't be translated.
Your son is profoundly deaf. There's no way on earth that he could hear, understand, develop language based on what he hears. He needs everything visual. He needs you to introduce life, introduce love, introduce happiness through signs, because that's what he sees. He needs that.
I was moved by the pride and independence of the deaf community, and I was grateful for the way they had reached out to us. But our family wasn't deaf. We didn't sign, and when I left Gallaudet, the distance between us and Thomas seemed even greater. Back in Dallas, I spent some time with the speech and sign class at Thomas's school. One day, I saw a little boy named Christopher kidding around with his teacher about purple potatoes.